All right. Welcome to COMP305 in the fall 2017 semester. We are week one, part one of our broadcast. We're talking about the final project overview. Again, I'm sharing this with Wallace from the other section. I'm section 2, and we are at Centennial, of course. We have to say that too, right? We're teaching Unity in this course like we talked about. So I talked about getting Unity from the Unity store if you have your own machine, for those people who missed the first part of the class. I also talked about sharing my projects up on GitHub on the Centennial College group. That's what that I've created. And what I really want to talk about now is this project, this final project. Now this is in kind of a beta form. This is subject to change a little bit. But what I'm going to do with the final project, and Wallace and I kind of agree with it, is you're going to create this original 2D game with Unity. Okay. Now, when I say original 2D game, could it be a knockoff of another game you've seen? Will you need an inspiration from somewhere? Probably. But I'm going to talk about forming teams today, because what I want you to do today in class is form up with people that are here, right? If someone comes into the class next week that was not here this week, then we'll have to figure out what to do with them. But I'd like you to kind of figure this out, right? Like who you're going to work with. You can't do your game on your own. So if you're someone who's like, I hate working, I work alone, like a superhero, right? This is not about being a superhero in this class, okay? It's about learning how to use Unity and make a game. So you need to work with somebody for your projects. Now, notice it says 80%. The other 20% are going to be things like homework assignments, labs, those kind of things that we're going to be doing in class that you'll be having to do by the end of class. So that's or within the week or whatever, right? Wallace is very creative with his challenges. I like some of his challenges he's got on. He's going to say, hey, here's a challenge to try and get this done. He also has a homework system that he uses with experience points, XP. I'm probably going to adopt it. I just have to work more with him on trying to figure out all the different pieces to it. And what this needs is a bit of a revamp when it comes to the outline. So when you form up your teams, you're going to there's several roles that I want you to fill, right? So you can't just say, yeah, I'm in the team and I do everything. We kind of do everything here, but I want you to think about these roles as your primary role in the project. Okay, so just because you're a software engineer doesn't mean you can't do a bit of production or art, as an example. But your primary role would be software engineer. So when you get together with your teams, think about who's the software engineer, who's the main guy, who's really good with code, or the main girl. It could be a girl too, that's software engineer. Who's really good with code here, who's going to be the one that we're going to rely on, who's going to be responsible for the management of the GitHub repository. The software engineer is going to have that responsibility. And if you look here, there's a bunch of things here that the software engineer is going to be responsible for. For example, scripting and scene generation. That's their main function. So even though you're working in a team, I can still give you marks based on your performance. If I look at the script and say, you're the main software engineer and your GitHub sucks, as an example, right? But it's your responsibility. Like, I'm going to go to you if you're the software engineer and tell you this, right? The next role is producer. Producers like a project manager from a game perspective. They keep track of things like documentation. They schedule things for the group when they meet outside of this room. Because remember, we're only meeting once a week on Saturdays, right? So you're going to need to meet at least one other time during the week to trying to work together to produce your game, right? And different piece parts of your game as we go forward, right? So that's something that the producer is going to be doing. However, that's not the only thing they do. Remember, it's not just around them doing documentation and then they're not going to code. I expect everybody to understand what we're doing, because remember, you're getting homework. You're going to get practice with Unity, every one of you, right? So everyone kind of learns how to do everything. Artist, sound engineer, we kind of combine this into one because there's not a lot of sound engineering in this course. There are we're going to use sound for feedback and that kind of thing, but I want you to combine with, kind of have somebody who's responsible to make assets, get assets from the asset store or other places, create sounds for feedback, create maybe some music, those kind of things. That's what the artist and the sound engineer is going to be responsible for. Game designer, people have this is a funny title and people are confused. Aren't we all game designers, you might ask? And that's not true, actually. So think about the person who's making the game rules, right? So they have the concept for the game, the vision for the game. That's going to be your game designer, right? They're more responsible with finding out what that main mechanic is that's different than any other game. Like, for example, and I kind of use this very lightly or high level, I'm making a platformer with Winston, or with Vincent, and now I know your name. And Vincent and I and Winston, we're three people. Maybe Winston is the crazy software engineer who doesn't like to use underscores in his private, variable names. And then Vincent, he's awesome when it comes to art and other things. And maybe I'm going to be the producer. See where I'm going here, right? And we need a game designer, right? And I'm just going to point to you. How do you pronounce your name again? Joe. So Joe's going to be the game designer. You see how our team is forming out. So Joe is going to be responsible for creating this game mechanic, and he's thinking, hey, let's build. This is Joe's vision. Winston, Vincent and I are going to support him, right? And Joe's vision is this idea of making a platformer with grappling hooks. This idea of grappling hook platformer, right? So the mechanic is I'm going to shoot a grappling hook to the other platform and swing across, right? That's what it's going to be. I can't jump. I can only swing. I don't know. It's kind of weird, right? But something of a different mechanic, right? He's going to figure out the rules, how you score, the main gist of the game, what the player's experience is going to be around. So game designer is actually one of the most important things, right, in this little thing, right? See what I'm saying? Please stop me if you don't understand what I'm talking about, right? Because if you're not a game student, right, and if you're taking this as an elective, then this stuff is going to be like, I'm talking Greek to you. I'm a Greek guy too, right? So I can say that, right? So a QA tester, you know what? QA testers are always looked down upon for some reason. They're like, I hate QA and analysis. It's the worst job in the world. I want to quit my job. Don't do it, right? QA testing is like super important, especially for quality. That's what it stands for, quality assurance, right? So they check for bugs. They make sure they work with the designer and maybe the software engineer hand in hand. They could be almost like a junior software engineer, someone who's going to help with the development. They might partner or pair program with the software engineer. But their idea is, I'm going to play the game. I'm going to test to see all the features work as they should. And I'm going to work with the game designer to make sure that he's good. He's, the vision that he wanted is really coming to light. That's what the QA tester is all about. All right, so those are the roles. But I want to talk about this. What if you only have 3 people? Well, you can't just have these 3 roles and forget about these 2 roles, right? So some people may have to wear many hats. And what I mean by that is maybe you're going to be an artist and QA tester. That might go well, right? Maybe you're going to be a game designer and the QA tester, right? Or something like that, right? And somebody else is going to be the producer and the artist. Now, this is dangerous stuff. You don't want to do this. These 3 roles here, you kind of don't want to mix them up too much, because if the producer is also the software engineer, we have a problem, right? That means the software engineer can really push. Let's say if Winston, he wants to push the project in a certain way, it could go down his way, right? Like, I mean, he's the producer. He's going to set stuff up. He's going to be the way it is. So you try and make this role independent of software engineer and independent as much as possible of game designer, right? Producer, game designer, and software engineer should be probably 3 different roles. The other one, artist, everyone can be kind of do a little bit of assets here, not a big deal, and everyone can do your QA, all right? That's my take on it anyway. So when you form up your teams today, I want you to think about those distinct roles, okay? These 3 things that I'm talking about are 4 things. I'm going to leave this up when we're forming our team. We're going to do a little team forming exercise, right? And then you're going to form up your teams, and we're going to create that. Okay. But in order to form up your teams, you need some idea of kind of a schedule. And this is kind of a very high-level schedule right now that we're doing because, like I said to you, we're revising the outline, right? So the first part of what I want you guys to do here, and again, I'm recording this for you, so you can always go over it later on. You don't have to remember what I'm talking about. First week, what I want to do is and I'm talking about by week 3, the first deliverable is this idea of a game pitch and your game design document. So I need to tell you what the game design document's all about, how I want it to be filled out. I'm probably going to start with that a little bit this week and more next week about your game design document. Your game design document and all the documents you create must have a logo. They must have the team name. I want you to make this as professional as possible, like you're making your own little company, right? Here in Game when we're making games, there's not a lot of studios in Toronto that are AAA studios. There's a lot of indie studios in Toronto. So I want you to think about yourself making yourself a little indie software engineering studio or an indie game design studio, and it's going to be you and the members on your team. So when it comes to week 3, you're going to pitch the game to me. You're going to say, so Tom, and to the class, you're going to explain the class. You're going to do a little presentation to the class, and that requires a PowerPoint. Okay, so you're not just going to come up here and say, so my concept is Mario with grappling hooks, right? It's not enough, right? You're going to say, here's what my inspiration is. And I'm going to give you a PowerPoint presentation that you're going to have as a requirement, right? And you have certain slides you have to fill out. You might have a inspiration slide. You might have a title slide. You might have, you know, what your, you might have to draw some wireframes, some kind of concept stuff, very high level, like draw out your level. What does it look like kind of a high level, right? Those kind of things. And that'll be due, let's say, like I said, week 3. I'm gonna build you up. So you're not gonna just like, I'm going to say, hey, go, see you later. And next week is a workshop. No. I'm going to have to train you on how to do this stuff, right? I want to make sure you know how to do a game pitch properly. I want you to know how to do a game design document. All that stuff is going to be due week 3. So after you've done your pitch and it's been accepted, so I say, yeah, it's good, right? You're going to do a second version of your game design document by week 5. You're not going to present that to the class. You're going to present it to me, okay? Each of these things is going to have marks associated with it to make up that 80%. Okay, so the first thing, as you notice, is team forming and the documentation, the planning that you're going to be doing in the first 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, plus learning Unity and to build up your capabilities and other homework that you're going to be doing within the first, you know, 4 or 5 weeks to get your capabilities up. All right, by week 7, that means instead of doing an exam, right? There's no exam in this course, but by week 7, before inter-session week, so the break, right? And I think it's 7 on, 7 off in this semester. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong? I think it's 7 on, and then we'll take a break, and then 7 more, right? So if it's true, then your first playable, when you're doing exams for other courses, your first playable is due, okay? So what is that first playable? You need to do a presentation again. So the second time you're going to do a presentation on your concept, right? You're going to be really talking about, I want to see some placeholder assets. It doesn't have to be your final assets. I don't expect animations or anything like that at that point, but I want to see the core mechanic. Whatever, if Joe says it's got to be grappling hooks, your grappling hook has to work at that point, because we want to test out your core mechanic to make sure it's working, that it's viable, right? If it's not viable and you've tried to make something that's out of whack, you'll know by your first playable. You don't want to figure that out by your beta. That's way too late, right? So, you know, between now and week 7, work with me on making sure your mechanic is functioning, whatever that mechanic is going to be. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. So that's your first playable. So that's going to take the place of your midterm. Okay, so you do your first playable, you do your presentation here. You show us, it's about 10 minutes of a presentation that you do with your team. You show us how this thing works, right? And then you go on break, and a week later you come back. And by week 10, you continue to work on your first playable by expanding it, right? And in alpha, you actually have more assets. Your first level should be completely working by alpha, right? Because by the end of this semester, I want you to make a game that has 3 levels, a start screen and an end screen, okay? Now, when you say levels, please forget, it's, again, prototype stuff, right? And this is all with Unity. So you need a start screen, a tutorial level, which is very short, a first real level, and maybe a boss level for extra marks, right? So like a 3rd level, right? And that's really what you're going to be producing for this semester. Notice that by week 12, you have a beta. That's another presentation. Every time you have alpha, beta, and first playable, those are updated presentations that you're going to do with your team. Okay, so your team is going to present your product to everybody here in the class over and over again, right? And so you're going to get better and better at pitching your product, your idea, right? You're pitching your idea over and over again to me, right? And you're going to get better and better. In the beginning, it's going to be kind of rough, right? Because maybe you've never done that before, right? But afterwards, it's going to get easier and easier. So around week 13, there's no more code. You can't add any more features at that point. And by week 14, you're going to do your final release and final presentation, which is going to be worth like 20%, right? And this final release and final presentation is going to take place of your final exam, right? So the times that you must be here, right? You must be here for your presentation dates. So all these dates that we're talking about, for example, when you do your first pitch, that's week 3. You must present with your team. If you're not present here with your team, even though I'm recording classes and everything else, that doesn't mean you don't have to come in, right? So you pitch week 3, you must be here. Your game design document, I don't expect you to physically present anything. Your first playable, you're presenting, that's week 7, right? Your alpha, you're presenting, that's week 10. Your beta, you're presenting, that's week 12, right? Code freeze and postmortem, you're not presenting, but your final presentation for your final exam, you're presenting. If you're not here for one of those sessions, you get 0. I don't care if you worked on your project with your team, all right? Why is that? Because this is like tests, like you being tested every single time when you come up, right? So this course is a mix of technical work, right? Teamwork, presentation skills that you're going to learn for the job, sharing your stuff on GitHub, right? Asset creation, all the stuff that you need to be really good game developers. And if you're a software engineer, a really good intro into what it is to make a game. Maybe it might inspire you to make games on another machine, maybe some kind of other platform like iOS or Android, okay? But that's what this thing is about. It's the first step, project-based learning before you get into your capstone, because some of you will be able to do a capstone as software engineers, and this could be something that you're doing. This is not a light course. It's not a bird course. If you think this is something that's going to be something you can kind of skip by and there's not a lot of work and you took it as an elective because you don't want to do a lot of work in the other courses, you're wrong. This is not that kind of course, right? These electives actually are quite challenging. This one, as well as COMP305, if you ever take that one with Node.js, which is offered in the winter, right? As well as my COMP397 course, which is this semester, which is after this, and the same day on Saturday, which is web game programming, purely scripting with the web, no game engine. That's even harder than this. So all those 3 things, right? Anytime that you take an elective like this, it's hard, right? So please don't think it's going to be easy, right? Because when you deal with teams, you know what? What was the famous saying? You know, if I didn't have to deal with people, everything would be easy. I'm sorry. None of us live in a rock, right? Under a rock where we don't have to see anybody, right? We have to work with people. This exercise is not you being a one-man show or one-woman show. It's all around working with other people and producing something at the end, right? Now, again, this is only 80%. I mean, only. This is 80% of your work. 20% of your work is going to be some of it on your own, right? Which is like your homework assignments and little exercises that I give you throughout the semester. Okay. How do you submit? Well, it depends on the kind of game you have. So here's some game examples, and there's some criteria. It's not going to be blue skies, right? So you can't just pick whatever game you want to make. It's not like that, because that would be like catastrophe, right? If I gave you a game that you can make whatever you want, that could lead you down into a really deep black hole that you'll never escape from, right? Because you could write yourself into a corner. Maybe some of you have never made a game, so you don't know how difficult it is, right? So here's some ideas, and there's some requirements. Okay, 2D platformer. The group setup, 6 members I want in the team. Okay, why 6 members? There's a lot of work to do in a real 2D platformer. This is not, I'm not talking about making Mario 1.1, all right, 1-1. I'm talking about your own platformer with your own assets and your own stuff, right? This is going to be take some horsepower. So you notice I need 2 software engineers, a PM, a producer, right? A game designer, some kind of asset creator, sound manager, and a quality assurance manager, right? So that you need to have physics, movement with jumping, enemies, traps, obstacles, unique to each level, at least 1 unique mechanic, and power-ups. So you see that is the requirements. Now you can do a lot in there. Different kinds of platforming games can fit this, but that's the hardest one to do. And notice it requires 6 people. Okay, so if you try and do this on your own with 3 people, you're nuts, and I want to prove it, right? Okay, let's talk about smaller games. I'm sure I'm going to get more of these, right? 3 members minimum. You need a software engineer, a game designer, artist, a quality assurance person, producer, right? So notice that the game designer artist wears 2 hats. The quality assurance producer wears 2 hats. And the software engineer, that's all he does or she does, right? Primarily, right? Okay, what do you do for this thing? It's not so easy either, but you need multiple bullet types, enemy movement patterns. So it's not just a matter of just like these things just fall down. I want patterns. I want some kind of predefined patterns that you code. Some kind of multi-stage boss for level 3, right? So you get to level 3, you beat part of the boss, he maybe shrinks, you beat more of him, he shrinks a little bit more, and you finally beat him, right? So make it more interesting if it's a top-down kind of shooter, right? Some kind of distinct setting progression. For example, moving from, the forest to the city to space or something like that, right? Where you're shooting in different places, right? So it's not just a matter of making a level that looks exactly the same with a different background, right? There's a different, distinct reason why you're doing stuff. Some kind of time challenge event, right? Or endless mode is optional. So something like, for example, you need to do it in your final challenge. You need to do it within a minute, or else it doesn't. You have to do it again. You fail. You have to try again. That could be an option. So that is your top-down side-scrolling space shooter, if that makes any sense. Okay, then this one is a little bit more challenging than the platformer, and I guess we could have done this in difficulty order. So we could have done the space shooter first, this one, the top-down tank game, and then the platformer, and explain those. Notice this requires 4 members, right? So software engineer, a game designer, a quality assurance PM, and an asset person or an artist. So you want to make multiple tank classes, tank players, right? So different loadouts. That's what I'm looking for. So not just not just 2 tanks. Okay, it's not going to be just 2 tanks that you're playing against each other. The tank game has been done to death. Okay, you're making your own loadouts, right? So let's say 2 different loadouts. So maybe I have a smaller tank that's faster, a heavier tank that's slower, and they look different, and they fire different kinds of weapons. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about, right? 4-player local multiplayer. So how do I do that, right? So 2-player, obviously, you can use. We're going to talk about game controllers. How do you use a game controller on your Unity? That's one of the things one of the topics we're going to be talking about for the game, and it's got to be pretty soon, right? Because your first playable has got to include some of these basic things, right? Distinct terrain with destructible objects, right? So how do you make destructible objects in your terrain? So make some kind of building, and then you shoot at it. It's a building sprite. You shoot at it, and then it changes to a blown up sprite, right? Maybe a crater, some kind of weird thing like that. Some kind of arced shooting. It's kind of creates almost like this, instead of just straight bullet shots, it has to use a little bit of physics, bombs, power-ups, and abilities. All right, so you can see that what we're looking at, it's still pretty generic. You can make a lot of these games, but there are some constraints because we want to kind of compare apples to apples, right? Sometimes in the past, what we've done is said, you have 3 people, and everyone has, can make whatever game they want, right? 3 people were never enough for a platformer, a good platformer. That's why we kind of made 6 people. To make a proper platformer with the requirements we have right now, and I'm giving you the requirements day 1, all right? You need to start now. Form your teams and that kind of stuff. So after we do this recording, and if I've explained the project, the next exercise is you forming up your teams, figuring out what you want to do, right? Coming up with your team name, your logo, all those kind of things today, right? And then I'll have a little thing to hand in for you today. All right, so it really talks here, this document talks about your more details. So, and I'm going to share this with you up online. When I put these up, I'm going to put these up on separate Dropboxes on eCentennial. Okay, so each Dropbox is going to have part 1. Here's your game pitch and game design document. That's going to be due week 3. That's worth 5% of your final grade. And there, if you notice, there is strict information about what you need, right? Part 2 is worth 5%. That's due week 5, right? And that's going to be your second draft of your game design document that we're going to be talking about. And then you're going to do your first playable. That's worth 10%, right? So just placeholder graphics. You don't need, the final graphics here. Just show me what this game could look like if you had graphics. So give me the idea of what this thing looks like, right? If the more graphics you have here, by the way, and the more it looks like your game, the better at this point, right? And your alpha, this is where the marks really start rolling. Week 10, that's 15% of your final grade, right? And I'm going to go into the details later on when I present this stuff to you up online. Your beta, another 15% week 12, right? You can see like, so far there's 30% in the second half of the semester, right? And then code freeze, you can do a post-mortem report in week 13. That's 5%. And your final percent, which is 25%, and there's two parts to this. One part is your presentation, and the other part is your code, right? And what you're going to be doing is you have a presentation requirement here, as well as your final code base, right? And that's going to be done and due by week 14. So the final week, and again, this replaces your final exam, okay? So that's really the structure for the presentation, the project. I think we thought it out pretty good. Wallace and I went into a lot of detail here. And what we're going to do is, one thing to note is that you're going to be building in this course, you're going to be doing Webgl builds, okay? So it's not just PC Mac builds. And why we've gone that way is because when you build a Webgl build, it's easier for us to mark, A. You can share it on the web if you really want to, B, right? Because it's a 2D game. So if you want to put it up on Azure or even on GitHub, GitHub can actually host your pages, host your game to make it work. You can share this as a portfolio piece when you're done. Okay, that's why we want to make you do Webgl. And that's why I said when you download and install Unity, please install all the parts. Because by default, it will not include Webgl as a build out, right? Webgl is just a target for what we're building, the platform, the web, okay? Any questions around project or any concerns? Is anyone really against not working with other people? If you are, you're in the wrong industry, right? I'm just telling you right now. If you're someone who wants to be a software engineer and you want to hide in a closet as a senior software engineer, it doesn't happen these days, right? We always work with people. We have clients we work with. We get requirements from our other people, and then we build things out, right? So, you know, you really got to learn how to work with people. One of the challenges is working in a group setting because you need everyone to work. What happens, I'm going to put this out there. One of the things I'm going to be doing when team forming happens is I want you to think about making a contract with you and your team. So what happens if your team, one of your members doesn't perform? By the way, I'm not picking your team. You're picking your team, right? If you have a real problem finding a team, I'll assign you a team, right? So what if you get somebody that I've assigned to you, right, to make your game? Or what if the numbers don't quite work out perfectly, and you know you're left out, and I put you somewhere and you don't work, right? You can't get marks for free in this course, right? So if you don't have a role, one of those roles have to be filled in the game that you're making. Number one, okay. And two, if you're doing a role and you're not performing, I'm going to ask for things like peer reviews. I want to get an idea of how people think. You know, are you working? Are you doing anything? When you present, you know, there's going to be somebody presenting, one or two people out of the team presenting. Not everybody has to present, by the way. Only the people that really know the product and know how to present well, right? If you want to build your presentation skills, you can certainly come up here and try it out as well. I will coach you on how to be a good presenter. But at the end of the day, everyone must pull their weight, right? So if you're going to think about, well, it's a team, so I can just, you know, I don't have to do anything. I just have to show up for meetings, and the game is just going to appear by itself, right? You're in the wrong course if you think that's the way it is. I don't know any course like that, by the way, right? So that's not how it works. So there's going to be a bit of a contract between you and the other people. There should also be a contract that you kind of create when you form your teams to kind of figure out when you're meeting. Figure out the time that works best for you to meet with your team, and have that kind of set out ahead of time. Maybe it's going to be on Tuesdays. I'm giving an example, between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. every Tuesday. Make that a working period. Try to work together. Try not to work remotely, like through Google Hangouts. That doesn't work. All right, I'll tell you right now, it's very challenging for people to kind of work remotely and produce something. Work together, right? These are the things that really work for me anyway. If you're working alone, the problem is, and you're trying to produce something that you know your team members are expecting you to produce. For example, you're the producer, you're in charge of setting up the documentation, the schedule, the project management, all that stuff, right? If you're not working properly and you don't organize things, then your team is going to be out of whack, right? They might meet without you, but they're missing a key element, right? You. If you're the software engineer and you don't produce your code somehow, you're like a key person, right? They might produce some code to get by and whatever, but if you're not producing, and we're going to tell when you come up and present the first time, we're going to be able to tell. We're going to say something's wrong with that project, right? Because there's things that are missing. The main mechanic isn't there if the designer isn't engaged to make that mechanic work, right? Or if it's not clearly defined. So one of the things we have to think about is everyone must work, and everyone's going to be judged based on the work that you do. So if you come up one week and I say, let's say, I don't know, let's say there's a team member, Tom, on your team. Where's Tom? And you're like, I don't know where he is. Okay. Tom gets 0 that day, right? Seriously. Right? I don't care where he is. Unless there's a medical emergency or something else that he can't physically be there, he's got to be there. You got to be there for your team, right? When you're presenting. And if Tom is there and then the team says, well, we put him on there, but then when I talk to the team, they say, yeah, but Tom never did anything, right? Tom just kind of was attending meetings, but he never did any quality assurance. Or he didn't do any kind of sound. We had to do it for him. Or he was supposed to be the asset creation guy, but every time we asked him for something, he couldn't produce, right? That's a 0, right? Or a lower mark, right? Everyone's got to work. Everyone's got to do this kind of stuff, right? So that's part of it. Now, this is not a project course. I got to say that too. So this is not just to be about a project. There's also other homework you're going to do. And this is a learning course where we teach you how to do stuff, right? So it's not a capstone course, but it's very similar to what the capstone is going to look like later on, right, when you get there. So please take what I'm going to show you this semester and carry it forward to your capstone course, because game production is complex. It's not easy stuff. It's the hardest stuff to make. If you're going to be a game developer, you're going into a very challenging, very competitive field, all right, that's very, very difficult to make. And I've used very 3 times, just to emphasize. I guess I'm overemphasizing. But it's the truth. It's the hardest way of the hardest part of software engineering, because it's not just about making something work. It's about making it fun. And how many games are fun out there, right? Really, for long. How many games attract people to stay with the game and from a game retention perspective for very long? Imagine the games you're going to play may not be fun forever, right? You might be able, you may not want to play them all the time. It's hard to make a fun game, even if it's good. Like you hit all the things, all the functionalities there, but it's not fun, right? So that's a real challenging thing to do. Think about this. You've worked a year on the game, right? Or maybe more, 2 years, 3 years in a real environment, No Man's Sky, right? And then it's not fun, right? Or it doesn't work like it should, or it has a bunch of bugs. Or Destiny, you're doing Destiny 2, and then guess what? Clan server's not up right now. There's a bunch of glitches when it comes to shaders. There's a bunch of other stuff that's going on that people are complaining about, right? Even the AAA studios have problems all the time, right? So, there's a bunch of stuff that can happen in a game production, and I want you to think about this. Start early, and that's going to be today, forming your team, and you got to make friends, all right? So if you don't know the people in the class somehow, you got to make sure you know everybody. You're going to know them at the end. Any questions around project or concerns? I'm going to take a break now, right? And then you can come talk to me on the break if you need to. Yes? Sorry. Say that again. Yeah. You? No online database. No persistent data. No. It's a prototype. Okay, we don't have time for that. It's gonna be a polished prototype, but it'll still be a prototype. I don't expect. It'd be nice to have. That's a nice to have thing, but like some kind of persistent data backend is what I was asked. Do I need that? No, you don't really need that for these games, but it's a nice to have. Okay. Any other questions? Webgl. Yeah, I think that's good. That's good that you brought that up. So Webgl is it's a graphics language, right, for the web, right? It originally came from, it's a port of OpenGL. OpenGL is an open source gaming language that we use, right? A gaming platform, and usually it's written in C++, right? There's OpenGL ES for handheld devices, right? For iOS and Android devices. and there's Webgl. So it's a graphic language that's made for the web. So basically you have JavaScript. It's written in JavaScript, and it allows you to, it's a very fast implementation of, for JavaScript. So it's not just like doing things with the canvas. There's no canvas that we're going to be using. It's the Webgl platform itself. So Webgl allows us to actually produce our game in Unity right on the web, right? So you can actually see it, play it on the web and everything. Okay, that's what Webgl is. It's just a platform. I want you to think of it that. I don't need to. I just get double click it, it works. But if I want to set up on a server, maybe near the end, we'll talk about setting it up on a server for you. Like if you want to set it up on Azure or on Heroku or on other servers, we can do that. And then anyone can play it in the class, right? And and even GitHub will do it for you. So even GitHub has its own server pages for free. So you can actually set up your own website on GitHub. So we'll talk about those things. Don't worry. It won't be something that I'm going to leave you to do by yourself. Go ahead, learn. No. Every step of the way, I'm going to try and guide you through this whole process. Okay? Any other questions around project? Did you have a question? No? Winston, you looked like you had a question. You had a comment to make about some of the games I talked about? No? You don't like any of the games? Okay. No problem. All right, so let's take a short break. That's hour 2. That's how fast it goes, right? Because there's a lot of detail here. And again, you can see that this is something that we're recording. So you can always go back to this stuff and hear some of the stuff I talked about. But this document that I have here, which is a PDF in PDF version, is going to be broken up and created into several drop boxes on eCentennial. That's what I want you to think about. And so you'll have the same information on each of the drop boxes, so you know what's required of you. And it's pretty detailed, as you can see from some of the stuff that it says. Okay? Let's take a short break, 10 minutes, and when we come back, we'll get finally into Unity. All right?